Rowling. If somebody says that they're a female and they're not, and they get found out, then they've been dishonest. Does it mean that they should lose their livelihood? Absolutely not, depending on obviously what that job is. But no, I don't really, I don't really understand how that's got anything to do with JK Rowling.
Well, it's got everything to do with it, because if, for example, you have a look at the discrimination that does arrive at people. So this individual here, born as George Jameson, transitioned and then became a model, and then when she was exposed as having been originally born as a man as opposed to the woman that she portrayed, then her life was kind of over and the discrimination started. And I guess it
Meaning
is.
what? How was her life? How was that? How was his life over?
Well, do you call him or her?
Totally him.
You see, that's the problem, because they were born a man and then they became a woman, so they can never be her.
Absolutely, I don't think any man can ever become a woman. No.
So then there's the problem, isn't it?
What? Not lying.
Well, it's not a question of not lying. It's a question of not necessarily understanding that somebody can be born in somebody else's body, in the sense that you can be born physically a man or a woman, but inside you may be, and it has been recognised, that you might yourself be an opposing sex in terms of how your brain works. Are you saying that that person should be discriminated against for the rest of their life because of the physicality of it?
No, I'm saying what you've just said there is absolute nonsense. There's no way that you can be, you are your body. There is no separation between your biological sex.
No, you see, I'm afraid that's wrong.
No. In what possible way would the DNA of a human build all the cells one sex, except a tiny little bit of a brain that would be a different sex?
Well, that's not necessarily. I mean, are you an expert in this?
Well, I'd probably say I was more of an expert than somebody who thinks you can actually.
Well, you're just telling me that you're an expert because you're female, and therefore
you use the word expert. I didn't use the word expert. You did.
Yeah, well, you're telling me that you can't possibly, but you have no expertise to back it up. Whereas doctors who are experts will say that people can be born. I mean, do you accept?
No, doctors don't say that. People who are invested, medical professionals who are invested in the industry, might well suggest that there is such a thing as being born in the wrong body. Doctors who actually care about patients and truth and honesty don't say such things.
Can okay? Let's just establish how that. Can you be born? Can you be born gay?
I think there are two routes to homosexuality, according to someone like Sheila Jeffreys. You can either be born gay or you can choose to be gay.
You can choose to be gay.
Well, yeah, that's according to people who have written about it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you'd probably have to survey the entire population of gay people. I certainly know some gay people who don't think they were born gay, and I know plenty that do.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and so you don't think that you could be born female, but in fact, in terms of how you operate, you are a man?
No, I think you can probably be born any sex and behave in any way, and that doesn't really change your biological structure.
But isn't that because you are certain on who you are, in the sense that I'm pretty certain on who I am, and therefore we can come at this subject with the knowledge and the experience that we have. But you can never be in the body, in the mind, in the brain of somebody else. And in fact, by saying the things that you're saying is pretty hateful, pretty disturbing, and pretty unpleasant.
Hateful? I think what you're saying is pretty hateful towards women, actually, that somebody can just rock up and decide to change.
They don't decide.
Of course they do.
No, you see, that's the problem. That's the problem. You're assuming that they do, whereas I'm saying, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this, and I'm not somebody, and therefore, I am unsure. But people tell me who have gone through transitioning, it's probably the most difficult thing to face, to confront, to deal with, and because of the views of people like you, it means that they are facing discrimination at every turn, and you're making their lives worse.
I just don't want men in women's spaces, and I don't care how those men identify. So it's up to everybody, however they want to live their lives, that's fine. But when it impeaches upon my life...
How does it impinge on your life?
Well, if I want to go in a female-only space and there's men in there who decide that they're women, then it's no longer a female-only space, is it?
But then men were told that they wanted to have men over any spaces, and then they were told that was discrimination. They weren't allowed to do it.
So are men more unsafe now they can't have the golf clubs?
Well, it's not a question of safe. It's just that it's cake and eat it, isn't it?
Well, it is for women. It
Right.
is a question of safety for women. We are
What?
much
So
less
all men are
safe in
predators?
unisex spaces. No, not all men. Just the one. Some are, and we don't know which ones they are. That's why we have segregated spaces.
Right. I mean, isn't it better that we try and train all people to be a little bit more respectful to each other?
Well, when we don't have any men committing sexual assault, rape, and domestic violence, then I will totally agree with you that we could do that. But until that happens, I'm afraid.
And so women don't commit those crimes as well?
Not at the rate of men, no. As they certainly don't commit rape.
Right. Okay. I am slightly staggered by your views on the basis that
that biological sex
I may have to change my mind. Maybe it was right that if you take those views, maybe you should be cancelled.
Wow. You're on talk radio, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you think people should be cancelled for having a view?
No, I don't. I don't think they should be. I don't think people should be cancelled, and I would like people to have different views. But it's just I find it staggering that you would want to have this kind of discrimination perpetrated against people who are born different from you.
No, I want men out of women's spaces. That's not born different. That's a biological fact. And that biological fact determines whether or not somebody is a risk to women.
And is it okay if men... Okay, all right, fine. No, I understand. No, I understand. So is it okay if men said that they wanted women out of their spaces? Is that all right?
Do you mean like private spaces like toilets and places where men might undress?
Might be.
Well, absolutely. Of course women shouldn't be in those spaces.
Okay, and what about other places?
Like what?
I don't know.
Like what places?
Bars, restaurants, or anything else? I mean, should we just go back to a segregated society?
The reason feminists of old decided that they wanted to eradicate some of those men-only spaces is because in those corridors of power, that's where important conversations were taking place, and women, by not being allowed in those spaces, were out of the conversation. That is a very different thing than wanting to keep men out of women's spaces, like when women are undressing. I mean, I'll ask you the age-old question. Does my 15-year-old daughter have the right to go in a female-only space and expect there only to be females?
But if there are only females, if somebody is or has transitioned, then they are a female.
Well, 90% of men that say they transition have no intention of taking hormones or losing their genitals. And so as far as I'm concerned, you don't transition anywhere. There's no such thing. Nobody ever changes from one sex to another. But certainly what we're talking about predominantly with men is men over the age of 40 deciding that they want to dress as women. It's what we used to call transvestites. And so this whole transgender just totally loses the fact of what really is going on. Most people who call themselves trans are not transsexuals. They're transgender. They're transvestites in old language.
Right. Okay. Well, then let's leave the old language. Kelley Jay Keen, founder of Standing for Women. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here.